I invited my parents and my family to Christmas dinner, but no one showed up. They abandoned me and went to my brother's dinner. But 20 minutes later, Grandpa walked in and handed me a gift box. I opened it and was stunned. 3 days later, they were begging in despair at his house. All right, bros, buckle up because this story is going to be a wild ride. I 29 male just pulled off the most satisfying revenge against my toxic family that I'm still getting a justice boner thinking about it. But first, let me give you some background so you understand how deep this rabbit hole goes. I work as a software architect for a fintech company here in Denver, Colorado. I know what you're thinking. Another tech bro story. But hear me out. I didn't start out successful. Actually, I was a complete loser for most of my 20s. Growing up, I was the classic middle child in a family that worshipped money and status. My older sister Jessica, 31 female, was always the princess who could do no wrong. And my younger brother Tyler, 26 male, was the golden boy athlete. Me? I was just there. The weird kid who liked computers and video games instead of sports or shopping. My dad Mark owns a successful construction company, and my mom Linda has never worked a day in her life, but acts like she's some kind of socialite. They live in this massive house in Cherry Hills Village, rich area of Denver for those who don't know, and drive matching BMWs. Growing up, everything was about appearances and who had the most expensive stuff. Jessica married some finance bro named Chad when she was 23 and immediately started popping out kids like it was her job. She's got 3 little demons now and spends her days posting Instagram stories about her blessed life, while her husband works 80-hour weeks to afford her shopping addiction. Tyler got a full ride to play football at CU Boulder, but blew out his knee junior year. Instead of finishing his degree like a normal person, he moved back home and has been finding himself for the past 3 years, while mom and dad bankroll his lifestyle. Meanwhile, I spent my early 20s being a complete screw-up. I dropped out of college twice, worked dead-end jobs, and lived in a crappy studio apartment eating ramen every night. My family never let me forget it either. Every family dinner was just them, reminding me what a disappointment I was, compared to Jessica's perfect marriage and Tyler's athletic achievements. The turning point came when I was 25. I was working at a computer repair shop making like $12 an hour and absolutely hating my life. That's when I met my best friend and future business partner, Paul. Paul's this absolutely hilarious Mexican-American dude who's about 5 feet 6 inches, but has the confidence of a guy who's 6 feet 4 inches. He was a customer who brought in his laptop, and we ended up talking for 2 hours about programming and business ideas. Dude had this crazy plan to start a cybersecurity consulting firm, and somehow he convinced me to quit my job and jump in with him. For the next 2 years, we basically lived off energy drinks and pure determination. We started the company in Paul's garage, sleeping on air mattresses and eating nothing but Taco Bell. But Paul kept me motivated with his ridiculous optimism and constant jokes. The guy could make a funeral funny, I swear. Our big break came when we landed a contract with a mid-sized bank that had been getting hacked constantly. We not only fixed their security issues, but saved them from a major data breach that would have cost them millions. Word spread, and suddenly we had more clients than we could handle. Fast forward to 6 months ago, and our little 2-man operation got acquired by a major tech company for $2.8 million. My share after taxes was $1.4 million, plus I got hired as their head of cybersecurity at $180,000 per year. Paul got basically the same deal and immediately bought a Tesla and started dating this smoking hot yoga instructor. Here's the kicker though. I didn't tell my family about any of this. As far as they knew, I was still the loser working at the computer repair shop. I kept living in my crappy apartment and driving my beat-up Honda Civic while secretly house hunting and planning my next moves. Why didn't I tell them? Because I knew exactly what would happen. The moment they found out I had money, suddenly I'd become their favorite son, and they'd all have their hands out expecting me to pay for their lifestyles. But the real reason I kept it secret was because I had a plan. You see, my family had been treating me like garbage for years, and I wanted to see their true colors when they thought I could finally contribute something. I was planning to tell them about my success at Christmas and throw a big celebration dinner to share the good news. I should have known better. These people don't change. They just get greedier. The first sign something was off came when Jessica called me in November asking if I wanted to contribute to the family Christmas celebration at mom and dad's house. She said they were planning something really special this year, and it would cost about $300 per person to cover the catering and decorations. $300 might not sound like much to you, but remember, as far as they knew, I was still making $12 an hour. That was almost a full week's pay for me. But I said yes because I figured this was my chance to finally reveal my success and show them I wasn't the failure they thought I was. Boy, was I wrong about how that would play out. Before I get into the disaster that was Christmas, let me paint you a picture of just how toxic my family dynamics really were, because understanding their personalities is crucial to appreciating the beautiful karma that comes later. Jessica, my older sister, is basically the poster child for entitled princess syndrome. This chick has never worked a real job in her entire life, but somehow thinks she's better than everyone else because she married a guy with money. Her husband Chad makes good money as a financial advisor, but she spends it faster than he can earn it. I'm talking about a woman who spends $500 at Target just picking up a few things and thinks a $200 dinner is casual. She drives a brand new Escalade that costs more than most people make in a year, but constantly complains about how tight money is. Her Instagram is just endless photos of her kids in designer clothes with captions about being blessed and mom life. The worst part? She's incredibly manipulative about it. She's mastered this fake sweet voice that she uses when she wants something, but the moment you say no to her, she turns into a complete psycho. I've seen her scream at waiters for bringing her the wrong drink and then turn around and smile for a selfie. Tyler, my younger brother, is somehow even worse. This dude is 26 years old and has never paid for anything in his entire life. After his football career ended, he just gave up on everything. He lives in mom and dad's basement rent-free, drives a car they bought him, and his biggest responsibility is taking out the trash twice a week. But here's what really gets me. He acts like he's doing everyone a favor by existing. He talks about how he's focusing on his mental health and finding his passion. But really, he just plays video games all day and goes out drinking every night. Mom and dad give him like $500 a week as an allowance for a grown-ass man. The few times I tried to suggest he get a job or go back to school, the whole family jumped down my throat about how I don't understand the pressure he's under and how I should be more supportive. Meanwhile, when I was struggling, their advice was always, just try harder, and maybe if you applied yourself more. My parents are the worst enablers you've ever seen. Dad built his construction business from nothing, so he knows the value of hard work, but he's completely blind when it comes to his precious children. He'll work 12-hour days busting his ass to make money, then hand it over to Jessica and Tyler without question. Mom is just as bad. She's turned spending other people's money into an art form. This woman hasn't worked since before I was born, but she acts like she's some kind of business expert. She's constantly giving advice about investments and financial planning while having zero actual experience with either. They live in this bubble where money just appears magically, and anyone who can't keep up with their lifestyle is clearly not trying hard enough. When I was struggling financially, their solution was always, just make more money, like it was that simple. The family dynamic was basically this. Jessica and Tyler were the golden children who could do no wrong, while I was the designated scapegoat who got blamed for everything. If there was family drama, it was somehow my fault for being negative. If someone needed money, I was selfish for not contributing more. If plans fell through, I obviously didn't care enough about family. But here's what they didn't know. I'd been documenting everything. Every shitty comment. Every time they chose Jessica or Tyler over me. Every instance where they made it clear I was the least favorite. I had screenshots of group chats where they planned family events without inviting me. Recordings of phone calls where they talked about me like I wasn't even a real person. Paul was the one who suggested I start keeping records. Bro, he said one day while we were debugging some code, these people are going to try to screw you over eventually. You need evidence when it happens. At the time, I thought he was being paranoid, but Paul has this weird ability to read people. He met my family exactly once at a barbecue last summer, and afterwards he told me, dude, your sister is a straight-up sociopath, and your brother is a parasite. Your parents are so far up their own asses they can't see daylight. These people are going to show their true colors the moment they think you have something they want. I laughed it off then, but damn if Paul wasn't absolutely right about everything. The other thing Paul convinced me to do was start working out and dressing better. If you're going to be successful, you got to look the part, he said. So I hired a trainer, bought some decent clothes, and started taking care of myself. By the time Christmas rolled around, I was in the best shape of my life and actually looked like someone who had their shit together. But I was still keeping the big news secret. I wanted it to be a surprise, you know? I had this whole fantasy about how they'd all be so proud of me and how it would finally prove that I wasn't the family failure they thought I was. Looking back, I can't believe I was ever that naive. But sometimes you gotta learn the hard way that some people will never see you as anything other than what they've decided you are. Christmas Day finally arrived, and I was actually excited. I'd been planning this revelation for months, had bought nice gifts for everyone, and was ready to finally share my success with the family. I even wore a new suit that Paul had helped me pick out, Nothing too flashy, but definitely a step up from my usual thrift store wardrobe. I showed up at my parents' house in Cherry Hills Village around 2 p.m. like we'd planned. The place was decorated like a fucking Christmas movie. Professional lights, massive tree. The works. Clearly, they'd spent serious money on this thing, but something felt off the moment I walked in. Usually, family gatherings are chaotic, with everyone talking over each other, but today there was this weird tension in the air. Jessica and Tyler kept exchanging these looks, and my parents seemed nervous about something. We did the usual small talk for about an hour. Jessica showing off photos of her kids' expensive Christmas presents, Tyler bragging about some girl he'd been dating, Mom complaining about how hard it was to find good help for the house. Normal narcissistic family bullshit. Then Dad cleared his throat and said he had an announcement to make. Everyone gathered in the living room, and I figured this was my cue to share my big news too. Perfect timing, right? Wrong. Dad stood up with this serious expression and said, "Kids, your mother and I have been talking, and we've decided it's time to make some changes around here. Jessica, you and Chad have been struggling with the kids' expenses, so we're going to help you buy that bigger house you've been looking at. We'll cover the down payment, $200,000. Jessica literally squealed like a pig and started crying happy tears. Chad looked relieved as hell. Apparently, they'd been trying to upgrade to some McMansion in Highlands Ranch, but couldn't afford it. And Tyler, Dad continued, we know you've been working hard on finding your direction, so we're going to invest in your future. We're buying you that franchise gym you wanted to manage. The initial investment is $150,000, but we believe in you." Tyler jumped up and hugged them both. I'm sitting there thinking, what the fuck? When did he even mention wanting to manage a gym? This was literally the first I'd heard of it. But Dad wasn't done. He looked at me with this weird expression and said, "And Jake, we know things have been tough for you lately. We've decided to help you get back on your feet too." My heart started racing. This was it. They were finally going to acknowledge that I'd been struggling and offer some real support. Maybe they'd help me with education or a business loan or something meaningful. "We're going to cover the cost of a coding boot camp for you," Dad said. "It's a 6-month program that costs $15,000. We think it might help you finally get a real career." The room went dead silent. Jessica and Tyler were trying not to smirk. Mom was looking at me expectantly, like I should be grateful. $15,000 for a coding boot camp, while they just gave my siblings $350,000 combined. I sat there for a minute trying to process what had just happened. Then I started laughing. Not a happy laugh. The kind of laugh that comes out when you realize you've been living in a completely different reality than everyone else. "Is something funny?" Mom asked, clearly annoyed. "Yeah, actually," I said, still chuckling. "You guys just offered to spend $200,000 on Jessica's house and $150,000 on Tyler's gym business. But you think $15,000 for a coding boot camp is going to solve my problems?" "It's a start," Dad said defensively. "We're trying to help you build some real skills." Real skills? I stood up, feeling this surge of anger I'd been suppressing for years. "Dad, do you even know what I do for work?" "You fix computers at that shop," Jessica said with this condescending tone. "Which is fine, but you're almost 30. Maybe it's time to think bigger." That's when I lost it. "You want to know something funny? I've been thinking bigger for the past 4 years. While you've all been treating me like the family failure, I've been building a company. 6 months ago, I sold it for $2.8 million. The room went completely silent. You could have heard a pin drop. "That's impossible," Tyler said. "You drive a piece of shit Honda." "I drive a piece of shit Honda because I'm not an idiot who needs to impress people with material possessions," I replied. "But since we're talking about money, let me break this down for you. My net worth is currently $1.4 million. I make $180,000 a year as a cybersecurity executive. I don't need your fucking boot camp." Mom's face went white. Dad looked like he'd been slapped. Jessica's mouth was hanging open. "You're lying," Jessica said, but her voice was shaky. I pulled out my phone and showed them my bank account balance. $1,847,000 and change. "Does this look like I'm lying?" The reaction was immediate and disgusting. Instead of being proud or happy for me, they all started calculating what this meant for them. "Well," Mom said, quickly recovering, "this changes everything. You should be contributing to the family investments. You could help Jessica and Tyler get even better opportunities." "Why would I do that?" I asked. "Because we're family," Jessica said, suddenly switching to her fake sweet voice. "We should help each other succeed. Like how you've helped me succeed for the past 29 years? Tyler jumped in with, "Dude, don't be selfish. We're talking about investments that will benefit everyone." I looked around the room at these people. my own family, and realized Paul had been absolutely right about them. The moment they found out I had money, suddenly I was supposed to be the family ATM. You know what? I said, standing up and grabbing my jacket. I came here today planning to share this good news and celebrate with you. Instead, you've shown me exactly what kind of people you really are. You spent $350,000 on them without blinking, offered me the scraps, and now that you know I don't need your charity, you want me to bankroll everyone else. Jake, wait, Dad started, but I was already heading for the door. Fuck this, I said. And fuck all of you. Don't call me unless you're ready to apologize. I walked out and drove straight to Paul's place. When I told him what happened, he just shook his head and said, Bro, I hate being right about this shit, but now you know who they really are. That was the last time I spoke to any of them for 6 months. And that's when the real fun began. After the Christmas disaster, I was pretty depressed for a few weeks. Even though I knew my family was toxic, part of me had still hoped they'd be genuinely happy about my success. Paul, being the absolute legend he is, decided it was time for some aggressive therapy in the form of making my life awesome. Bro, he said one day while we were grabbing lunch at this taco place, you're sitting here moping about people who don't deserve 5 minutes of your thoughts. You know what we're gonna do? We're gonna level up your entire existence until they see what they lost. Paul has this way of turning everything into a project. Within a week, he'd convinced me to buy a sick downtown loft in the Rhino district, lease a BMW M3, not buy, leasing is for tax purposes, hermano, and join this exclusive gym where all the successful business dudes work out. But the best part about Paul is that he's completely shameless about enjoying success. While I was still feeling guilty about having money, he was like, fuck that noise. You earned this shit. These people had their whole lives to treat you right, and they chose not to. Now they can watch from the sidelines while you live your best life. Paul also started documenting everything I was doing on social media. Professional photos of my new place, videos of us at networking events, pictures from business trips. He created this whole narrative of Jake's glow-up that was honestly pretty impressive to watch. This isn't about showing off, he explained while editing photos of my loft. This is about controlling your own story. Right now, your family thinks you're still the loser they remember. When they see what you've become, it's gonna mess with their heads. And it worked. Within a few months, mutual acquaintances started telling me that my family was asking questions about me. Apparently, Jessica had seen some photos on Facebook through a mutual friend and couldn't believe I was living in a $400,000 loft and driving a BMW. Paul and I also started hanging out with this crew of other young entrepreneurs and executives. These guys were making serious money. Tech founders, real estate developers, investment bankers. For the first time in my life, I was around people who actually respected what I'd accomplished instead of treating me like the family fuck-up. But Paul's masterpiece was what he called Operation Petty Betty. He convinced me to hire his cousin Maria, who runs a high-end event planning company, to throw me a housewarming party for my 30th birthday. Not just any party. This thing was going to be legendary. We rented out the rooftop of my building, hired a DJ, got premium catering, open bar with top-shelf everything. Paul designed invitations that looked like they cost more than most people's rent. The guest list was basically everyone successful under 35 in Denver. Startup founders, athletes, influencers, you name it. But here's the kicker. Paul made sure word got back to my family about the party. Not an invitation, mind you. Just enough information for them to know it was happening and that they weren't included. This is psychological warfare, my dude, Paul explained while we were reviewing the final party plans. They're gonna see that you're thriving without them, surrounded by successful people who actually value you. It's gonna drive them absolutely insane. The party was incredible. About 150 people showed up. The vibe was perfect, and I actually felt like I was celebrating my life instead of just surviving it. Paul hired a photographer who got amazing shots of everything. Me networking with successful people, giving a speech about overcoming obstacles, just generally looking like I had my shit together. But the real payoff came 3 days later when Jessica called me for the first time since Christmas. Jake, she said in that fake sweet voice she uses when she wants something. Hi, I hope you're doing well. I saw some photos from your party on Instagram, and it looked amazing. I didn't respond, so she kept going. Listen, I wanted to apologize for how things went at Christmas. I think there was just some miscommunication, and we all said things we didn't mean. Maybe we could get together for coffee and talk about everything. I put her on speaker so Paul could hear. He was grinning like a maniac and gesturing for me to play it cool. I'm pretty busy these days, Jessica, I said. What exactly did you want to talk about? Well, just family stuff. And honestly, Chad and I have been looking at some investment opportunities, and we thought maybe you'd be interested in partnering with us on something. You know, combining our resources for bigger returns? There it was. Paul mouthed, "I fucking told you so," from across the room. "I'll think about it," I said, then hung up. Over the next month, all three of them, Jessica, Tyler, and my parents, reached out with various excuses to reconnect. Tyler wanted to get my advice on his gym business. Mom thought we should have a family meeting to clear the air. Dad suggested I come over for dinner to discuss some opportunities. Paul was loving every minute of it. They smell the money, bro. Now they're trying to figure out how to get their hooks in you. But we weren't done yet. Paul had been working on phase 2 of his plan, and it was about to get much more interesting. Paul might joke around a lot, but when he gets serious about something, he's fucking terrifying. While my family was trying to worm their way back into my life, he was conducting what he called due diligence on their financial situations. "If these people want to play money games with you," he said, "we need to know exactly what we're dealing with." Paul has connections everywhere from his business networking, and he knows how to find information about people without doing anything illegal. Public records, social media analysis, mutual acquaintances. The guy could probably work for the FBI if he wanted to. What he found was fucking hilarious. Remember how Jessica and Chad were struggling to afford that house upgrade? Turns out they were in way worse shape than anyone knew. Chad's financial advisory business was basically failing because he's terrible with money. They had over $80,000 in credit card debt, were behind on their current mortgage, and the Escalade Jessica drives? Leased at $900 a month that they could barely afford. The only reason they could even consider buying a bigger house was because my parents were offering the down payment. Without that $200,000, they were basically looking at bankruptcy within the year. Tyler's situation was even more pathetic. The gym franchise he wanted to manage? It was actually a scam. Paul found forum posts from other people who'd invested in the same company and lost everything. Tyler had somehow convinced my parents to invest $150,000 in what was essentially an elaborate Ponzi scheme. But the real revelation was about my parents' financial situation. Remember how they were throwing around hundreds of thousands of dollars like it was nothing? Turns out Dad's construction business had been struggling for the past 2 years. They'd had to lay off workers, lost several major contracts, and were basically living off their savings while pretending everything was fine. "Bro," Paul said, showing me bank documents he'd obtained through completely legal means, "your family is basically broke. They're spending money they don't have to maintain their lifestyle, and they were counting on you being poor forever, so they'd never have to help you." The numbers were staggering. My parents had maybe 6 months of expenses left in savings. Jessica and Chad were one emergency away from losing their house. Tyler was a grown man with zero income and zero prospects. They were all financially fucked, but still trying to maintain their rich family image. "This is perfect," Paul said with that evil grin he gets when he's planning something. "They need your money way more than you need their approval. Time to flip the script on these people." That's when Paul outlined what he called the reversal, a plan that would expose their hypocrisy while giving them exactly what they deserved. First, we were going to accept one of their invitations to reconnect, but on our terms. Second, we were going to let them think they could manipulate me into giving them money. Third, we were going to document everything so they couldn't deny what kind of people they really were. The goal isn't just revenge, Paul explained. It's to make them reveal their true selves so completely that you never feel guilty about cutting them off permanently. I was hesitant at first because it seemed cruel, but Paul put it in perspective. They've been emotionally abusing you for decades, and now they want to financially abuse you too. This isn't about being mean. It's about protecting yourself and making sure they can't hurt you anymore. So I called Jessica back and agreed to have coffee with her and Chad. But I also told Paul to come with me as my business partner to observe and provide backup. The meeting was at this upscale coffee shop in Cherry Creek that Jessica picked because she thought it would impress me. She and Chad showed up dressed like they were going to a job interview, clearly trying to look successful and trustworthy. Jessica immediately launched into this rehearsed apology about Christmas and how the family had been going through a stressful time and didn't handle things well. Chad nodded along like a bobblehead, occasionally adding comments about how much they valued family relationships. Then they got to the real reason for the meeting. They'd found this amazing investment opportunity in cryptocurrency that promised huge returns. They needed a partner to invest $100,000, and they thought I'd be perfect because I understood technology. Paul, who'd been quietly sipping his coffee and taking notes on his phone, finally spoke up. "Which cryptocurrency?" Chad got this panicked look and started stammering about how it was new and exclusive, and they couldn't share too many details because of confidentiality agreements. So you want Jake to invest $100,000 in something you can't even name? Paul asked with fake innocence. Jessica jumped in with, "It's not about the specific investment. It's about family members supporting each other and building wealth together. Like how you supported Jake when he was struggling," Paul replied. The conversation went downhill fast. Within 20 minutes, they'd basically admitted that they saw me as a potential ATM and couldn't understand why I wasn't immediately writing them a check. As we were leaving, Jessica grabbed my arm and said, "Jake, I hope you're not going to let pride get in the way of helping your family." That's when I knew Paul's plan was going to work perfectly. After the coffee shop disaster, Paul and I spent a week planning what he called the ultimate karma setup. The idea was to give my family enough rope to hang themselves while documenting everything for posterity. "We're going to let them think they're playing you," Paul explained while we mapped out the strategy. "But really, we're controlling every move they make." First, I called a family meeting at a neutral location, a private dining room at a nice restaurant downtown. I told them I'd been thinking about what Jessica said regarding family support, and I wanted to discuss some potential opportunities. The response was immediate and pathetic. Suddenly, I was everyone's favorite person again. Mom called to tell me how proud she was of my success. Dad wanted to pick my brain about business strategies. Tyler asked if I wanted to hang out and catch up. The family meeting was scheduled for a Saturday afternoon. Paul convinced me to wear a wire. Nothing illegal, just a recording device to document what was said. Trust me, Hermano, you're going to want to remember this conversation exactly. I also hired a professional videographer to discreetly film the meeting from outside the restaurant's windows. Not for blackmail or anything illegal, just for my own records and potential social media content later. They all showed up dressed like they were going to church, clearly trying to make a good impression. The conversation started with more fake apologies and expressions of family love. Then I dropped the bait. "I've been thinking about ways to help everyone achieve their goals," I said, "and I have a proposition. I'm willing to invest in the family, but I want to do it right. Professional contracts, clear terms, realistic expectations." You could practically see the dollar signs in their eyes. Jessica immediately jumped in with, "That's exactly what we were hoping for. Chad and I have been researching investment opportunities that could benefit everyone. And I've been working on a detailed business plan for the gym franchise," Tyler added, even though Paul and I knew it was complete bullshit. Dad got this serious expression and said, "Son, this could be the beginning of a real family business empire. We could all work together and build something lasting." For the next hour, they pitched me on various investment opportunities that all basically amounted to me giving them money with promises of future returns. The amounts they were asking for kept getting bigger as they got more comfortable. Jessica wanted $150,000 for a real estate venture, paying off her debts and buying the new house. Tyler needed $200,000 for the gym franchise plus operating capital, funding his lifestyle indefinitely. My parents suggested I invest $300,000 in expanding Dad's construction business, keeping them afloat. By the end of the meeting, they were asking me to invest over $650,000 in various schemes that would basically make me their personal bank account. But here's the beautiful part. I acted interested. I told them I needed to review everything with my financial advisors and attorneys, but the concept sounded promising. I said I'd get back to them within 2 weeks with a detailed proposal. They left that restaurant thinking they'd just hit the lottery. Over the next week, they called constantly with additional information about their investment opportunities. Jessica sent me PowerPoint presentations that looked like they were made by a high school student. Tyler created a business plan that was basically just him explaining why he deserved money for existing. My parents provided financial documents that showed exactly how desperate their situation really was. Paul was having the time of his life watching them dig their own graves. Bro, these people have no shame. They're literally asking you to fund their entire lives while pretending it's about family business opportunities. But the best part was still coming. Because I wasn't planning to give them money, I was planning to give them something much more valuable. The truth about what kind of people they really were. The trap was set. Now it was time to spring it. 2 weeks later, I called another family meeting. This time, I chose the location very carefully. The same upscale restaurant where we'd had Christmas dinner as kids. The place where they'd always made me feel like the outsider looking in. Paul and I arrived early to set up. He'd brought his laptop and a portable projector, plus several folders full of documents. I was wearing my best suit and carrying a briefcase, like I was about to close a major business deal. When my family arrived, they were practically vibrating with excitement. They thought this was the day they'd become millionaires off my success. "Before we discuss any investments," I said once everyone was seated, "I want to share some research my team and I have done on the opportunities you've presented." I nodded to Paul, who fired up the projector and connected his laptop. The first slide appeared on the wall. Family Investment Analysis, prepared by Paul Martinez, Chief Financial Officer. Let's start with Tyler's gym franchise opportunity, I said, clicking to the next slide. What appeared was a detailed breakdown of the franchise company, including news articles about it being investigated for fraud, testimonials from people who'd lost money, and documentation showing it was essentially a pyramid scheme. Tyler's face went white. Where did you get this information? Public records, Paul answered cheerfully. It's amazing what you can find when you actually research investments instead of just believing whatever someone tells you. The next slide showed Jessica and Chad's real estate venture, which we'd discovered was just them wanting to flip houses with zero experience and no actual business plan. According to your credit reports, I continued, you're currently $80,000 in debt and behind on your existing mortgage. The investment opportunity you presented is actually just asking me to pay your bills while you pretend to be real estate moguls. Jessica started crying. Chad looked like he wanted to disappear under the table. But I wasn't done yet. The final slide was the masterpiece. A complete financial breakdown of my parents' situation, showing their declining business, depleted savings, and the fact that they'd been living beyond their means for years. And finally, I said, Dad's construction business expansion. Except there's no expansion planned. The company is 3 months away from bankruptcy, and you need $300,000 just to stay afloat. The room was dead silent except for Jessica's sniffling. Here's what I find fascinating, I continued, standing up and pacing around the table. 6 months ago, you offered me $15,000 for a coding boot camp while giving Jessica and Tyler hundreds of thousands. You thought I was poor, so I deserved scraps. But now that you know I have money, suddenly I'm supposed to fund everyone's lifestyle? Jake, Mom started, we're family. We should help each other. Help each other? I laughed. When have any of you ever helped me? When I was struggling to pay rent, did you offer assistance? When I was eating ramen every night, did you invite me for family dinners? When I was building my company working 80-hour weeks, did any of you show the slightest interest in my life? That's different, Dad said weakly. You're right. It is different. Because now you need something from me. That's when I revealed the real purpose of the meeting. Paul handed me a folder containing printed copies of everything. Their debt records, failed business ventures, and most importantly, recordings of all our previous conversations, where they'd admitted to seeing me as nothing more than a potential source of money. I'm not giving any of you a single dollar, I said, but I am giving you something much more valuable, the truth about yourselves. I dropped the folder on the table. These are copies of everything we discussed today, plus documentation of your real financial situations, plus recordings of our previous conversations. Consider it a reality check. Jessica finally stopped crying long enough to get angry. You recorded us without permission? That's illegal. Actually, Paul interjected, Colorado is a one-party consent state, perfectly legal as long as one person in the conversation knows about the recording. Tyler suddenly found his voice. You can't just abandon your family like this. Watch me, I said, heading for the door. Oh, and one more thing. I'm posting all of this on social media tonight. Since you all love maintaining your image so much, I figured your friends and neighbors should know what kind of people you really are. The explosion of shouting that followed was beautiful. They were screaming about family loyalty, threatening to sue me, begging me to reconsider. But it was too late. They'd shown their true colors, and now everyone would see them for what they really were.